Well, you know what I talk about. I am in my brother's greenhouse.
Taylor Swift's sudden and almost surreal debut on a podcast, specifically on her boyfriend Travis Kelce's show New Heights with his brother Jason Kelce, has taken the internet by storm, and while at first glance it might seem like just another celebrity interview, the implications of this move, the way Taylor chose to frame her answers, the timing of her new album announcement, and the underlying subtext that may or may not be tied to her now fractured friendship with Blake Lively has created an enormous amount of chatter that deserves careful unpacking, because when it comes to Taylor Swift, nothing is accidental. Everything is layered with meaning, and every word she utters or avoids saying becomes an Easter egg for her army of fans and a point of speculation for the media. And so when she appeared for the very first time in her entire career on a podcast, despite being one of the biggest superstars in the world with a platform so large she has never truly needed to explain herself, it immediately raised the question of why now, why here, and why in this particular way, and the answers seem to circle back not only to her evolving public relationship with Travis Kelce, but also to the ongoing Hollywood scandal involving Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, and even to some extent political figures like Donald Trump. Because her album announcement on the podcast was carefully tied to symbolic numbers and subtle references, such as the release date of October 3rd, which at first glance might look random but quickly reveals itself to be deeply Swiftian. Since Taylor has long been obsessed with the number 13, and when you add the digits 10 plus 3 you get 13, a number she has always described as lucky and fate-driven. And then when you realize that this date also aligns with Travis Kelce's birthday, which falls on October 5th, just 2 days later, it becomes even more obvious that she timed her release not just as a personal milestone, but as a public declaration of how intertwined her art is with her personal relationships. And the fact that she admitted on the podcast that this alignment felt perfect only strengthened the perception that her creative output is now in direct dialogue with her romance, further feeding the narrative that Taylor Swift does not simply release music. She crafts cultural events, complete with symbols, puzzles, and emotional subtext for fans to decode. And when she revealed the album tracklist on the show, the speculation hit a fever pitch, because some of the titles seem to mirror the very controversies and dramas that have surrounded her for the past 2 years, most glaringly her deteriorated relationship with Blake Lively, which until recently had been portrayed as one of Hollywood's most enduring and genuine female friendships, but now sits under a cloud of tension, betrayal, and rumors of manipulation. And while Taylor never directly mentioned Blake's name on the podcast, the mere existence of a track titled Ruin the Friendship immediately triggered fan theories, since the phrase so perfectly encapsulates what many believe has happened between the two women, whether through betrayal, conflicting loyalties, or the pressures of navigating fame. And of course, Taylor's gift has always been in writing songs that can be interpreted multiple ways. So while the track could just as easily be about a romantic relationship between two friends that soured once they crossed the line into romance, the fact that the title so easily doubles as a commentary on a platonic friendship destroyed by drama makes it impossible not to connect the dots back to Blake, especially in light of everything that has unfolded in recent months with lawsuits, media leaks, and PR spin cycles. And this is not the only song title that hints at deeper meaning, because another track, Cancelled, written in all capital letters, immediately stood out, both because of its aggressive presentation and because of its uncanny resemblance to the kind of social media posts Donald Trump has been making about Taylor on his platform Truth Social, where he often uses all caps to mock or insult her, at one point calling her irrelevant and unattractive. And while Swift has never shied away from political undertones in her music since at least her 2018 political awakening, the word cancelled could serve as a layered double entendre, reflecting both the internet culture of cancellation that she has survived countless times, and also the very public, very petty feud with Trump, who continues to attack her despite her rising cultural dominance. But then things get even more intriguing with another song title, The Fate of Oilia, because fans immediately drew a line between the fictional name Oilia and the character Blake Lively once played in the film Savages, where her name was O, or Ophelia, often referred to as O. And the possibility that Taylor chose a variation of that name is almost too coincidental, leading many to suspect that she is deliberately invoking Blake's cinematic past as a metaphor for their current tension, almost as if to immortalize the friendship fallout in coded pop lyrics. And then there's Wish List, a title that could be seen as a nod to private desires, perhaps even referencing Blake's alleged wish to maintain control over narratives, or Taylor's own wish to be free from the constant speculation, while another track, Life of a Showgirl, features none other than Sabrina Carpenter, a younger artist who has become both a protege and a collaborator for Taylor, but who also has her own connection to the brand Wayfair, a company that Blake has been rumored to have a complicated relationship with. And when fans discovered that Sabrina once spoke positively about her work with Wayfair, it added yet another layer of intrigue to the possibility that this album is filled with carefully placed jabs, Easter eggs, and subtle references to the fallout with Blake Lively, proving once again that Taylor's songwriting is less about random creativity and more about building an interconnected puzzle for her fans to unravel. And while Taylor insisted on the podcast that she wrote and produced the album while on the Eras tour, a tour that dominated global headlines from early 2023 through late 2024, many have questioned how much of it was actually recorded during that chaotic travel schedule and how much might have been retroactively tied to that timeline for narrative effect. But regardless, she described the album as upbeat, high energy, and filled with pop bangers, echoing Travis's description that it was pure high pop and designed for maximum impact. Though curiously, the album contains only 12 songs instead of 13, which shocked fans given her fixation on that number, and the lack of hidden tracks made it even more unusual, suggesting that Taylor wanted this body of work to be direct, sharp, and free of excess, which again could be read as a metaphor for her current approach to public drama. No extras, no vague denials, just clean, sharp commentary disguised as pop anthems. And yet, despite all of this indirect signaling, what struck many listeners the most about her podcast debut was how she handled questions from Jason Kelce about the pressures of fame, online rumors, and the relentless scrutiny of her relationship with Travis, because this was the moment where Taylor, without ever naming Blake or Ryan or any of the lawsuits swirling around them, seemed to craft a subtle but unmistakable response to the entire situation, saying that while some people allow online criticism to dominate their thoughts and ruin their days, she herself refuses to fall into that trap, choosing instead to detach from the internet and not let comments dictate her mood, a philosophy that stood in stark contrast to the behavior attributed to Blake and Ryan, who by their own admission and through public perception seemed to thrive on constant feedback, validation, and external praise, almost as though social media adoration is a drug, particularly for Ryan, who has admitted he craves validation from his audience. And in that context, Taylor's calm insistence that she does not live that way sounded very much like a rebuke, a pointed but polite way of saying she has moved on from that ecosystem, and that she will not allow herself to be consumed by the need for online applause. And yet the irony is that even in saying she does not care about online chatter, she simultaneously acknowledged that her name is constantly being used as clickbait by others. Because as Jason pointed out on the podcast, everyone knows that putting Taylor Swift's name in a headline will automatically generate clicks, shares, and engagement, whether it is positive or negative, which again circles back to the Blake Lively situation. Since one of the biggest accusations from Taylor's camp during the legal scandal was that her name was being dragged into a situation she had nothing to do with, that she was being exploited as a headline generator even though she had been on tour, recording an album, and had no involvement in Blake's legal disputes outside of one song placement in a film. And so this podcast became her platform to subtly but firmly draw boundaries, making it clear that while the world might continue to use her as a pawn for attention, she herself is not emotionally investing in those narratives. And this is the genius of Taylor Swift. She finds a way to say everything without explicitly saying anything, leaving fans and media to decode the layers, debate the references, and spread the theories, all while she maintains plausible deniability. And yet, even as she projects detachment, the album's tracklist and the subtext of her answers ensure that the very speculation she claims not to feed is in fact being fueled in precisely the way she wants, which means that whether she is writing about Trump, about toxic online culture, about her romance with Travis, or about the implosion of a high-profile friendship with Blake Lively, she has once again ensured that she dominates the cultural conversation on her own terms, proving that her first podcast appearance was not just a casual chat, but a carefully calculated moment of narrative control, an unveiling of new music that doubles as a coded message to friends, foes, fans, and critics alike, and perhaps most importantly, a reminder that no matter how loud the noise gets around her, Taylor Swift always finds a way to turn that noise into music, into myth, and into power that extends far beyond the microphone in front of her or the stage beneath her feet. When it comes to the endless cycle of fame, scrutiny, lawsuits, social media chatter, and the way narratives can be twisted into either weapons or shields, the latest situation involving Taylor Swift, her sudden appearance on a podcast, the rumors swirling around her fractured relationship with Blake Lively, and the lawsuits that have dragged her name into headlines despite her repeated insistence that she is uninvolved, provides a perfect case study of just how toxic and relentless online criticism can be and why Taylor's remarks resonate so deeply with both fans and observers, because she makes it clear that the healthiest path for someone in her position is detachment, ignoring the noise, and refusing to give power to critics, haters, or opportunists who build platforms off the back of tearing someone else down. And this philosophy mirrors exactly what she said on Travis and Jason Kelce's podcast when she explained that she doesn't allow one negative comment to ruin her day. Whereas others in her life, friends or acquaintances, fall into the trap of obsessing over social media chatter, reading every cruel remark until it shapes their identity, which she believes is corrosive, unbalanced, and unsustainable. And her point is not abstract but rooted in real experience because Taylor has spent over a decade at the center of cultural storms. From the Kanye West VMA interruption in 2009 to being branded as a serial dater in the early 2010s to her high-profile feud with Scooter Braun over her masters, and each time she has faced mass criticism, ridicule, and at times cancel campaigns, yet she has survived and reemerged stronger, largely because she learned to master the art of silence, patience, and transformation, rather than feeding the outrage machine directly. And this message stands in stark contrast to how Blake Lively has handled her own recent wave of negative press, because rather than weathering the storm quietly and waiting for public opinion to shift, she chose to double down, file lawsuits, and claim she was the victim of a calculated smear campaign, despite very little evidence surfacing that such a campaign was ever orchestrated against her. As even the court records and text exchanges introduced into evidence suggest that online chatter critical of Blake was already in full force before any formal PR teams or crisis managers became involved, indicating that her downfall in public perception had far more to do with her own marketing missteps and the visceral anger of fan bases, particularly Colleen Hoover fans who were deeply offended by her handling of sensitive subject matter, than with any organized conspiracy. And this is where Taylor's point rings especially true, because as Megyn Kelly astutely pointed out when interviewing Brian Friedman, part of being a celebrity is understanding that waves of bad press are inevitable, that not every cycle will be favorable, and that at times the pylon will feel overwhelming, unfair, and perhaps even defamatory. But the role of a celebrity is not to crumble under the weight of that negativity or to spend endless energy fighting it, because that only magnifies the perception of victimhood and keeps the negative story alive. And this seems to be exactly where Blake faltered, because instead of quietly pivoting, acknowledging mistakes in her film's marketing, and moving on to her next project, she latched onto the negativity, amplified it through legal filings, and gave more oxygen to the very criticisms that were destroying her reputation, proving that Taylor's refusal to engage directly with criticism is not cowardice but wisdom, a strategy forged from years of navigating similar storms, because as the YouTuber in the transcript points out from personal experience, responding to negativity never ends well. It flips the narrative so that the larger platform looks like the aggressor, and it keeps one stuck in a cycle of addressing accusations that will never actually stop, since detractors feed off reaction, and ignoring them, while difficult, ultimately deprives them of power, which is why Taylor's detached approach is healthier than Blake's defensive one. And yet it is fascinating to see how their divergent strategies now collide in public perception. Because as Blake struggles to convince courts and the public that she is the victim of a smear campaign, Taylor has already insulated herself by portraying any use of her name in the controversy as mere clickbait, as Jason Kelce even acknowledged on the podcast, pointing out that everyone knows if they put Taylor Swift in a headline, it will drive clicks regardless of relevance, which perfectly aligns with her PR team's messaging that she was dragged into the Blake drama against her will, even though she had nothing to do with it, being fully occupied with her era's tour and album creation. And this tension is further heightened by the text message exchanges that surfaced in court filings, where Jed Wallace's potential involvement as a crisis PR manager for Blake was being debated even before he formally signed on, with team members already noting that negative comments online about Blake matched exactly the talking points they would have used had they been orchestrating a smear, only to admit that Jed hadn't even started yet. Which reveals that the narrative of Blake being bullied into bad press is flimsy, because the negativity was organic, emerging from genuine outrage by readers and fans, not manufactured attacks, and this undercuts the central premise of her lawsuit, leaving her looking increasingly desperate to blame external forces like Wayfair or rival PR teams for a reputation decline that was already happening naturally, and it highlights the futility of her strategy when compared to Taylor's. Because Taylor's silence and selective messaging turn her into a figure of resilience, whereas Blake's constant litigating and finger-pointing reinforce the perception that she cannot move on, cannot accept criticism, and cannot recalibrate, a mistake that only worsens her image, especially in the eyes of fans who see her actions as tone-deaf. And this is where the speculation about Taylor's album enters the equation, because the timing of its creation, allegedly during her tour, but potentially edited and reshaped afterward, aligns perfectly with the period when Blake's lawsuit erupted in December, the very moment when Travis Kelce himself admitted he had to turn off comments on social media to preserve his own sanity, since the negativity and speculation were becoming unbearable, suggesting that both Taylor and Travis were directly impacted by the discourse surrounding Blake. And though Taylor insists she does not consume or care about online chatter, the reality is that she processes everything, absorbs it, and transforms it into art, meaning that while she may never release a blunt diss track, it is almost certain that lines, themes, or coded references to Blake and the implosion of their friendship will appear scattered across the new record, just as they have in past albums where Taylor has chronicled feuds with Katy Perry, Kanye West, or unnamed ex-friends, and fans know to listen closely for these breadcrumbs, these Easter eggs that serve as both catharsis for Taylor and puzzles for her audience. And this dual function keeps her at the center of cultural conversation without ever needing to explicitly call anyone out, which again ties back to her mastery of handling criticism. She redirects the energy into something productive, creative, and commercially successful, rather than wasting it in courtrooms or Instagram rants. And so, as the YouTuber in the transcript reflects on their own experiences with online criticism, lawsuits, and the weirdness of strangers speculating as if they knew their life, it becomes clear that Taylor's strategy is not only effective for celebrities, but also instructive for anyone with a public platform. Because engaging with negativity validates it, fuels it, and traps you, while detachment allows you to reclaim control. And this is the larger lesson Blake Lively has failed to grasp. Because instead of acknowledging her marketing failures, apologizing for offending domestic violence survivors, and recalibrating her message, she insisted on fighting a losing battle. And by dragging Taylor's name into it, she only highlighted the difference between them. One star who cannot escape her own obsession with validation, and another who has learned to float above the noise, choosing when and how to respond through carefully curated artistic choices, which is why Taylor remains untouchable, even as she subtly plants Easter eggs that remind those paying attention that she sees everything, remembers everything, and knows exactly how to tell her side of the story without ever saying the words directly, leaving fans to debate endlessly whether Ruin the Friendship, or Cancelled, or The Fate of Oilia are about Blake, Trump, or some combination thereof. And in doing so, she ensures that the speculation never dies, the attention never fades, and the power remains firmly in her hands, proving once again that in the ecosystem of celebrity criticism, silence and subtext are stronger than lawsuits and tantrums, and that Taylor Swift has mastered the art of thriving in a world designed to tear women down, while Blake Lively, tragically, has only shown how self-sabotage magnifies the very criticisms she wishes would go away. And this is the difference between those who learn to ignore the noise and those who let it consume them, a difference that will be forever etched into the pop culture record through the unfolding drama of albums, podcasts, lawsuits, and the endless churn of online commentary that feeds the machine of modern celebrity. Thanks for watching. Subscribe my channel Corventa.